What makes a good detective? Is it the way that they are written, or how well they solve the case? Or perhaps it is the way the mysteries are built themselves? While I would say that all these things are important, I would also add that the way a detective is introduced shows us a lot about their morality, personality, and sets the tone for conflicts and developments along the way. And today I want to highlight how a simple case can introduce a detective who is morally good but not afraid to use deceit and trickery to solve her cases. So let's talk about Kyoko Okitegami and her first case. So our story begins in a science lab where the head director, Imei Kuro, tells everyone to freeze and that no one is leaving the room. The reason? Well, there seems to be a thief amongst them. As everyone acts confused, lab director Imei explains to the others that the backup data has gone missing and that someone must have stolen it. The director and the other members of his research team begin to search the lab to see if maybe this important piece of research was not stolen but just lost. However, after checking the floors, then under the desk, and then the rest of the room, they realize that this was not a false alarm and that the SD card was in fact stolen. And although the thief could have been anyone amongst them, everyone's eyes turned to Kakushide Yusuke. Now, Kakushide Yusuke will become a rather important side character for later stories, so I recommend you remember him. He's going to play a very significant role in the development of Kyoko's character, and will also serve as the reader's insight into her psychology and thought processes. But anyways, returning to the story, with everyone's eyes turned to Kakushide, he starts thinking how this situation is no different from the many others in the past. When there is trouble or a crime, he is seen as the cause of it all, constantly suspected as the culprit, doubted as the suspect, thought of as the ringleader, and regarded as the man behind the curtain. It is due to these unfounded suspicions that Kakushide has developed something of a defense mechanism of hiring a detective. And one detective in particular has helped him out more than any other. Her name is Kyoko Okitegami. Now, Kakushide describes Kyoko as something of a very quirky woman who's not easy to use, but boasts the greatest ability despite not having a 100% success rate in crime solving. Kakushide refers to her as the fastest detective, but also the most forgetful. With everyone's eyes still turned to Kakushide, he makes a quick phone call to Kyoko. Once she arrives to the lab, the first to meet her, of course, is Kakushide. The two exchange a few words, after which Kyoko confirms his identity and asks him a hypothetical question. In a situation where I find you, my client Kakushide, guilty of theft, who is going to pay me? However, head director Urien responds and offers a very simple compromise. If you solve this case by 9 p.m., regardless of whether Kakushide is found a culprit or not, the Research Institute will take over the fee. These conditions give Kyoko approximately 3 hours to solve the case, and she agrees with them. Kyoko begins her investigation by sweeping the rooms clean and checking every corner possible, because if the thief is still amongst them, he would most likely hide the SD card in a place that the others wouldn't think to look. However, this search soon proves ineffective, so Kyoko switches to performing a skillful body search. However, this too fails to produce the SD card, and so Kyoko then switches to performing another trick where she isolates each individual and brings them in for questioning. Kyoko questions every member of the lab until Kakushide is left. She brings him into the room, and we learn several interesting things from their interaction. The first thing we learn is that Kakushide is perceived as the most suspicious by others due to the fact that he has been working in the laboratory for only 2 months and was primarily hired to take care of menial things. Second, we learn that Kyoko is incapable of holding memories for longer than a day, as she has a condition where every time she goes to sleep, she loses all her memories of that day. How this memory loss works exactly will be explained in the later novels, but for now, know that her memory loss basically functions as a reset, where every time she goes to sleep, she loses the memories of the past 24 hours. Now, the last thing that we learn is the importance of this SD card. It wouldn't really be a case without some stakes involved, and we come to find out that the research data on this SD card is so important that if it were to make it out of the lab and fall into the hands of a rival organization, they would be able to make years' worth of progress in just a few months. With these stakes in mind, Kyoko moves the conversation ahead and asks directly who Kikushide suspects to be the thief. Kikushide answers honestly as he doesn't know. However, he does point out that the financial motive for stealing this data is unlikely, an idea that Kyōko appears to have already considered. Kikushide points out that it is possible that the theft was committed out of malice. However, Kyōko shuts that down, pointing out that the value of the data does not match a crime committed out of malice. Kyōko reveals that this entire conversation was simply meant to assess Kikushide's character, and having difficulty naming who would be the fourth suspicious person shows to Kyōko that he is a kind and thoughtful person, someone whom she can rely on. After saying all of this, both of them rejoin the others and re-examine their assumptions. Kikushide in particular thinks whether lab head Imei is truly as innocent as it would seem. After all, he may have taken the data himself or hidden it or disposed of it because of his research hitting a standstill. And what better way of avoiding responsibility than to claim that years' worth of research was stolen? However, Kyōko points out that while the probability of this is not zero, it is far more likely that whoever stole the data hid it among the other SD cards. After all, if you want to hide a tree, do it in a forest. So to make sure that all the places were checked, Kyōko tells the other research members to look through the data, the other SD cards, and see if the missing one is mixed in among them. However, this, just like the body search, produces no results, which in turn angers a character named Honda. Kyōko, however, paying no attention to Honda's outbursts, pulls Kikushide aside and tells him that they need a short meeting. During this meeting, Kyōko reveals that she has roughly deduced the location of the SD card. However, she points out that even if she gives the location of the SD card, she will not be able to point out the culprit or wash away the suspicions placed on Kikushide. As a result, she chooses not to reveal the location of the data until she apprehends the culprit. The two of them then make their way to the same room where Kyōko questioned everyone. And once they're there, Kyōko reveals that she chose to place her trust in Kikushide and that she will be relying on him from this point on. Kyōko goes on to ask Kikushide to provide further information regarding the suspects, like their personality, financial situation, personal history, family relationships, and a number of other things. But before he can share anything with her, Okitegami's posture gradually gives way until she suddenly slumps over. Kikushide, unable to act quickly enough, reaches over to wake her up. But by the time he's near her, he can feel her gentle breath and realizes that she has fallen asleep. Kikushide tries to gently shake Kyōko as a way to wake her up. This works and Kyōko opens her eyelids, only to ask Kikushide, "Who are you?" After hearing these words, Kikushide, realizing what had happened, instantly removes his hands. He tries to explain himself, but Kyōko simply stares at him for a bit, then shifts her gaze, rolls up her sleeve, and begins to read the information written on her forearm. "I am Okitegami Kyōko, 25 years old, head of the Okitegami Detective Agency. White hair, wears glasses, memory resets every day." Having read this information, Kyōko then pulls up her skirt up to her ankles, where with the same pen and handwriting it says, "Currently on the job." She then, right in front of Kikushide, lifts up her outer garment, where on her exposed abdomen, using a different color pen this time, information about Kikushide is written. Height, 6 feet 3 inches, 25 years old. A client, ask for specifics. You can trust him. She makes sure to read this information twice and then turns to Kikushide, apologizes to him, and asks him to fill her in on the situation. Not wanting to drag things out, he begins explaining everything that had happened up to this point, how she deduced the location of the SD card, and fell asleep just before revealing that information to him. Kyōko tells Kikushide not to worry, as this was simply the result of her inattention. Upon hearing this, Kikushide inquires if Kyōko had pulled an all-nighter the day before, as this would explain why she had suddenly fallen asleep right when she did. But Kyōko refutes this, saying she's not the sort of person to accept new work while sleep deprived. Instead, Kyōko declares that she was most likely drugged. She then asks Kikushide if during the time of her investigation she had consumed anything, but Kikushide responds by saying all she had was a cup of coffee. Kyoko nods in satisfaction, saying that that has to be it, and explains how she most likely left these messages on herself just in case the culprit was nearby and chose to exploit her primary weakness. Something to note here is that Kyoko is not being truthful, and in fact, in the later novels we will find out that our detective has a number of contingencies revolving her memory loss, and that one of those contingencies will later involve Kikuchi date, as symbolized by the fact that she wrote his name using a different color marker. Regardless, Kyoko explains that one of the four suspects must know about her well enough to try and put her to sleep, as doing so would render her helpless. But Kikuchi shuts down that specific line of thinking and explains that none of the other members seem to know who she was before that. Kikuchi also points out that the main reason why Imai agreed to hire Okitegami was due to her memory condition, as he was worried that the outside investigator might leak his research. Now, although this is something that will be addressed in the later cases, I will mention it here that there is a reason as to why Kyoko immediately considered that one of the suspects might know her. One of the main driving points for this whole series of novels will be to uncover why her memories seem to disappear once she goes to sleep, who is responsible for it, and is there a way to reverse this, and ultimately to find out what is the value of memories. But anyways, returning to where we were, Kyoko points out to Kikuchi how Honda had previously teased her, questioning if she really was this famous detective that everybody was talking about. She points out how those specific words seem to be a tad bit unnatural coming from someone who had never met her. Kikuchi acknowledges this point, suggesting that it is not impossible that Honda or one of the other members of the lab has prior knowledge of Kyoko. Kikuchi then recalls several prior cases in which the other culprits attempted to put Kyoko to sleep. After all, why go through the trouble of killing the detective when you can obscure their deductions by putting them to sleep? As Kikuchi is about to bring this point up to Kyoko, she begins explaining to him that at the very least, they know the culprit is among the four members in the lab, and that is enough for Kyoko to stage a trick that would reveal the culprit's identity and expose their crime. Because, as Kyoko explains, the culprit made one fatal mistake. They laid their hands on the detective, and if they plan to break the rules, then she will have to do the same. Right after saying that, Kyoko asks Kikuchi to lead her to the laboratory, and once they're there, Kyoko thanks everyone for waiting, but doesn't give away the fact that she had lost her memories. She then asks Kikuchi to suppress the culprit in case they become rowdy, all while the other members of the laboratory begin to assault her with questions. Kyoko, then ignoring everyone's questions, turns around and begins explaining how in the end, humans see what they really want to see, despite having the answers. She then slowly approaches the hot water dispenser, grabs it, and begins explaining how she already knew where the SD card was hidden back when she originally swept the room looking for it. Hearing this, lab head Imai immediately asks if the data is safe, only for Kyoko to explain that it is safe from being leaked, but that the data itself is far from being safe because she had placed it inside the boiling water. Everyone in the room, including Kikuchi, are surprised by this new revelation, but before anyone can say anything, Kyoko, in a loud voice, orders everyone to stand still. Surprised by the commanding authority of her voice, the room freezes in place as Kyoko simply raises a finger and points at Gyfyub Nagami before confirming that she is the culprit. The case concludes with Kyoko explaining her trick, as well as showing how Gyfyub intended to smuggle the backup data outside the laboratory. Kyoko then gives a scornful lesson to Gyfyub, telling her to never interfere with her sleeping patterns again, as unlike her data, once Kyoko's memories are gone, they are unretrievable. She then collects her payment, thanks everyone, and turns to leave, with Kikuchi following behind her. And once they're outside, Kyoko explains to Kikuchi Gyfyub's motive for the theft. Kyoko also explains how this motive doesn't really matter to her, as Kyoko treats all of these cases more like a game, rather than some kind of moral pursuit of justice, or a desire to make a world a better place. This is contrasted with Kikuchi's opinion, where he tells Kyoko that Gyfyub's motive was actually not selfish, but rather born out of a desire to help her mother. This contrast will be explored in later novels and will become one of the major driving points for growth both in Kikuchi and Kyoko's characters. But for now, our detective wishes all the best for Kakushidate and hopes that something like this doesn't happen again. But if it does happen, he shouldn't hesitate to call her. Kakushidate says he won't forget her services and promises to contact her again if he finds himself in trouble. Kyoko smiles in response to those words and asks him to bring a harder case next time. She then pinches the corners of her long skirt and gives a high-class goodbye.